So I got into skateboarding when I was a kid. I actually started when I was about 12 years old, I think. And, it was the most important thing for me. It was a really, really big thing. It's actually shaped and sculpted to a very large degree who I am now. And, I've traveled all over the world skateboarding. I've met so many amazing people through skateboarding. I've had so many incredible experiences just because of skateboarding. I've actually been riding a skateboard for almost half my life. Now, obviously, over the years, I sustained a lot of injuries, and pretty much two of the worst injuries that I sustained was the first one. I actually broke my patella, my left kneecap. I broke that 3 times, and I had an operation on that where they put a metal wire in around the edge of the kneecap to kind of clamp it. But over the course of time, that metal actually fractured into 3 pieces. So I still have that in my knee now. I've basically just got 3 pieces of broken metal in my knee. And the last major injury that I sustained that totally put a stop to me skateboarding, it put a stop to me doing anything physically active in my life, was I broke my ankle in 4 places at once. I had a number of operations on that ankle and on that foot over the course of a few years. The surgeon basically diagnosed me with very serious osteoarthritis and said that from the scans, my ankle basically looked like the ankle of somebody, in their 70s or 80s. And, he said, basically, I've got to get used to a life of sitting in chairs. I'm never going to be physically active again. Basically, borderline disabled, and really all that he could do after a number of operations was to tell me that, the best choice I have is to just accept a morphine prescription for pain relief and come in for routine surgery as and when it's needed. Now, I've got permanent nerve damage in the back of my foot, like around the back of my ankle. I've had a lot of bone spurs removed from around the joint. I've had a lot of inflamed tissue removed. I've had the front, the back, the sides of my ankle operated on. The cartilage in my ankle had completely worn away. So in one of the operations, they actually ran an electrical current through the cartilage in order to refracture it and stimulate new tissue growth. And that wasn't really a particularly successful part of the operation. And actually, regrowing cartilage is something that I've had to approach holistically myself. And the thing is, every time I'd come out of surgery and I would kind of heal up, I was in a worse state than before the operation. And it happened. I had a fair few operations and I came out worse every single time. The reality was I couldn't really walk for a couple of years, really. I could shuffle around the house in lots and lots of pain. I couldn't really walk my dogs. I couldn't really do anything physically. I'd gone from being extremely physically active all the time to not being remotely active. And because I was so static physically, all kinds of other physical, health degenerative problems were manifesting mentally as well, mentally and emotionally. I no longer had this creative outlet that I'd had for so much of my life. I no longer had a way of expressing myself creatively through physical activity, and all of this was taking a really, really big toll on me. Now, I was scheduled to have a couple more operations, and I decided to cancel those, and instead I began to study nutrition, I began to study herbalism, I began to learn about healing and self-healing, and, reading about people that had kind of transformed really serious health conditions and terminal illnesses and all of these things, and how they totally turned it around. So I really began to work on myself in that way, and through focusing on nutrition, the use of adaptogenic herbs, and some light physical therapy, and working my way towards things like rebounding, over the years I actually was more able to bear a bit more weight on my ankle. The surgeon had told me to use a walking stick pretty much for the rest of my life. and to do as little walking as possible. But I was determined that this was not going to be my fate. So over the course of time, over many years, pretty much, I guess, about 5.5 years, I'd gradually, slowly, gradually improved my physical capacity to actually walk around and move and do stuff. And I decreased pain somewhat, so that I was actually able to walk out of the house and actually go for short walks in the neighborhood, and I could never really go very far. The pain was always just too intense. After really half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour of walking, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I got into riding my bike, and that wasn't really so weight bearing on my ankle, so it kept me fit, kept me somewhat stimulated. I could ride around and get exercise. But anyway, over the last, really this year, since this year, I've actually been doing a number of different practices. I've been doing certain meditation practices that work on a number of different levels, one of which is physical healing. Working with the 5 elements from the Tibetan perspective, learning certain yogic breathing and pranic breathing exercises to actually increase the flow of chi or prana throughout the body and actually circulate that energy to these sites of injury. I've been learning and practicing Tibetan yoga as well, and since incorporating all of these kind of practices, integrating them into what I was already doing, I've actually begun to experience a kind of much more radical healing cycle taking place. Because the last over half a decade for me has been completely physically immobile, inactive, loads and loads of pain. But not only that, I've had no balance at all. Even just walking around the house, I'm always falling over and having to grab hold of the nearest thing to stop myself from hitting the floor. Going upstairs and downstairs, I've been so wobbly, so unsure of myself. And, I've had a lot of minor injuries over the years just from that, just from like walking from room to room and not making it into the next room without falling down. But in the last kind of couple of months or so, like really since August just gone, really just a few weeks ago, I really began to feel my core stability returning. I began to feel a real sense of balance returning within me, and some strength returning in my lower limbs and in my joints, a lot more flexibility returning in my joints. Still, by no means were they remotely in good shape, but I felt like things were really improving a lot. Like I actually felt the best that I'd felt since having this last major injury. So we've had a longboard in the house for years now, years and years. Just really, really long, massive wheels. It's quite safe to just cruise around on the flat, at a nice steady pace. I wonder, actually, I feel really quite inspired to try and ride around on that very carefully in an empty car park not too far from the house. So I went to like a supermarket car park in the evening. It was empty, and I probably stayed there for like an hour, and I wondered, am I actually going to have enough balance, enough equilibrium, enough stability and strength to actually be able to do this? And I totally did. I actually cruised around the car park for an hour, going quite fast, pushing with my foot, with my bad ankle, and it was loads and loads of fun. And that kind of inspired me to get myself a cruiser board, which is actually a lot smaller and much more maneuverable. And I thought, that's cool. I'll just get one of those, and I can enjoy the low risk feeling of just being able to ride around on a board again and actually have that kind of creative expression, that creative outlet, that feeling of freedom, being able to ride around in that way. So I got myself this board, and I took it out that day, and I had a little cruise around on it, and it was actually a lot more difficult for me to ride this because it was a lot smaller. The amount of balance needed was a lot more than with the longboard. So I felt very wobbly on it, very shaky, but still, cruising around for after like 20 minutes or so, I got a bit more familiar with the board. I began to feel a bit more confident. my curiosity encouraged me to actually try a couple of small, you know, easy-going, not too dangerous tricks on this board. And I tried a kickflip. I made it first go, to my amazement, and I tried a couple of other tricks. I made them within a couple of goes. I wasn't in any pain. I felt like really quite blown away, because this was a chapter of my life I totally closed the door on. This was something that I was told I would never even run again. I'd never even walk pain-free again. I had to prepare for a life sitting in chairs, doing nothing physically active. And here I was, through my own journey of self-healing, actually able to ride a skateboard again, albeit not very well. So I took the cruiser board out, you know, a couple more times and just enjoyed the feeling of riding it around. And I ended up, you know, doing a few tricks on it that I was really, really pleased with, that I thought I would never, ever do again in this lifetime. It doesn't work anymore. And then I began to feel like the cruiser board was kind of showing its limitations, and for what I felt capable of, I actually wanted to get myself like a regular board, like a normal board, the kind of board I always used to ride. I realized, I didn't even know this, but there was a really small but really good skate park not that far from where I live. So I went down there a couple of times. And I actually went down there just like a week ago. So obviously this is all just fun for me. This is just rediscovering my ability to express my creativity in this way, and it's just so much fun. But I'm not going to start taking this really seriously. I'm not going to start pushing myself to be like really, really good or anything like that, because having these major injuries and experiencing all of this suffering, really, and having to go through that whole series of events and accepting that I would never skate again, that whole process has opened up so many doors for me in my life that I was completely unaware of before. It's a very large part of what's put me on the path that I'm on now. So, you know, I've got too much to lose now if I really seriously injure myself. But this is just a really fun, creative exploration for me. And the reason why I'm uploading this video really is because I just want to illustrate that even when you're dealing with something that appears like it's permanent, or it appears like there's no way out, the degree of suffering is immense. The degree of pain and anxiety and stress, tension, depression, and all of these things is overwhelming. And you've even got experts telling you, that's it now, you're just going to have to accept that this is the way it is, and there's little we can do about it other than symptomatic relief. Even in that situation, which so many of us find ourselves in throughout our lives, there are other alternatives. Now, I'm not saying that each and every person is always going to be able to completely reverse their conditions and completely heal from them, because that's not the case. But what I think is the case a lot of the time, probably in more cases than not, that healing is absolutely possible. Self-healing is absolutely possible. And I'm an example of that. You know, I was basically a cripple, like I couldn't even walk. And I was told that's the way it's going to be from now on. And now look, that's not the truth at all. Now I've got a lot more healing to do, and I'll definitely be sharing my path of exploration through more videos, and I'll be exploring specifically in details the kind of injuries I've had and exactly what I've done to address those injuries and actually initiate a cycle of self-healing. So, you know, that can all come later, but I just wanted to make this video to really share this story with you, because it's been a very inspiring journey for me, and hopefully the story and, you know, the kind of result now would maybe be inspiring for some of you too.